Imagine pulling into a family gathering. Before anyone asks how you've been, before anyone asks you how work is going, before they know anything about your investments, your retirement account, or your savings, they've already noticed your car. It's almost automatic. Whether we admit it or not, cars have become one of the most visible signals of success in modern society. We like to think we're above judging people for what they drive, but most of us are not entirely. A luxury SUV in the driveway tells a specific story, a sports car tells another, and a 15-year-old sedan tells yet another. Sometimes those stories are accurate, but often they're completely wrong. The funny thing is that a car occupies two completely different roles at the same time. On one hand, it's just transportation, a tool, a machine whose job is to get you from one place to the other reliably and safely. But on the other hand, it's theater, it's identity, it's a reward for the hard work. It's a visible representation of years spent working hard. And because it's all of these things at once, buying a car becomes a surprisingly emotional decision, especially because for many people, it's one of the biggest financial decisions they'll ever make. If you own a home, it's probably the second largest purchase of your entire life. And if you rent, as most people do, it may very well be the single most expensive thing that you own. That's a lot of pressure for something that spends most of its time sitting in a parking lot or a driveway. So naturally we find ourselves caught between two competing instincts. One says, I've worked hard. I deserve something nice. I don't want to drive around in something that makes me feel like I'm struggling. The other whispers, be practical. Think about your future. Don't overextend yourself. And most people assume these two voices are enemies, that you have to choose one over the other. Either you drive something boring forever, or you enjoy life now and accept the financial consequences that come. I don't think that's true. I think there's a better question to ask. Not, can I afford this car? But, what kind of life am I buying when I choose this car? Because here's something I didn't appreciate when I was younger. When you buy a car, you're not just buying a vehicle. You're buying a stream of future decisions. Every monthly payment competes with something else. Whether it's vacation, a down payment on a house you're trying to save, an investment option, an emergency fund that's actually viable. Maybe it's the ability to leave a job you no longer enjoy. The ability to sleep a little better knowing that your finances aren't stretched too thin. And that's why I think so many conversations about buying cars begin in the wrong places. People start with the payment. What can I afford each month? The dealership certainly wants you thinking that way, because once you reduce everything to a monthly payment, almost anything starts looking affordable. An extra $70 a month? Sure. Another 100? Maybe. Stretch the loan another year? Well, why not? It lowers the payment. One decision at a time. Until you're driving home in a car you never planned on buying in the first place. The payment doesn't feel outrageous, but the commitment is enormous because the payment isn't just for 1 month, it's every month, for years. That's a completely different calculation. At first, I used to think the smartest people simply spent less on cars because they didn't really care. Then I noticed something interesting. Many of them actually liked cars. Some of them loved the cars. They appreciated good engineering, comfort, quieter cabins, the reliability of certain brands. Some even enjoyed performance cars or working on cars themselves as a hobby. The difference wasn't that they disliked nice things. The difference was the order in which they made decisions. They didn't begin by asking, what car do I want? They began by asking, what role should this purchase play in my financial life and other life? And that's a subtle but critical difference. Because if your goal is simply to own the nicest car possible, you will always find a reason to spend just a little bit more. There's always a nicer trim, a larger engine, a better sound system, a panoramic sunroof upgrade, a luxury badge. One more package, one more upgrade. Manufacturers have become incredibly good at making the next option seem just close enough to justify. But if your goal is maximizing your future options, the conversation changes completely in the other direction. Instead of buying status, you're buying flexibility. And that's the framework I want to share with you today. I call it the freedom stack. Every dollar you spend on a car competes with 4 different versions of your future. Your life today, your flexibility tomorrow, your investments over time, and your future upgrades, including future cars. But most people think just about the first one, your lifestyle today. Smart buyers think about all 4. Let's start with today's lifestyle because that's the easiest one to understand. When people ask, how much car can I afford? They're usually thinking about one thing. Can I make the monthly payment? Technically, maybe. But affordability isn't really about whether you can survive the payment. It's about whether the payment still leaves room for the life you actually want to live in other areas of life. And that's where many people underestimate what a car really costs. Not because the sticker price is hidden, but because ownership becomes permanent. Let's use a very ordinary example. Not a luxury SUV and not a sports car. Just a basic, dependable sedan. In 2026, if you walk into a dealership looking for a new, no-frills Honda Civic, by the time you include taxes, registration, destination charges, and dealer fees, you're looking at a roughly $30,000 out the door. I'm deliberately leaving insurance out of this discussion, not because it isn't important, but because unless you can comfortably replace your car with cash tomorrow, you should probably be carrying comprehensive coverage whether you lease it, finance it, or you own the car outright. Insurance is simply a part of responsible car ownership regardless. So let's focus on the purchase itself. Finance that $30,000 over 60 months, 5 years, at around 6% current interest rates, and your payment lands somewhere around $580 a month. Over 5 years, you'll spend roughly $35,000 in total. Many people hear $580 a month. I want you to hear something different. $7,000 every year, because that's what it really is. Not $600, $7,000. Changing that unit changes how your brain evaluates the purchase. $7,000 every year doesn't sound like a car payment. It sounds more like a lifestyle. And that's exactly what it is. Now, let's put that number into context. Imagine someone earning $20,000 a year. $7,000 isn't just expensive. It's impossible unless someone else is paying most of their bills. 35% of annual income just to own a car leaves almost nothing for everything else. Now imagine someone making $50,000. That exact same Civic consumes around 14% of their gross income. It's still meaningful and still noticeable. Now imagine someone earning $100K. Nothing about the car changed. Nothing. Yet now it represents roughly 7% of the annual income. The car is identical, but the burden of paying for it has changed. Cars don't become affordable because the payment changes. They become affordable because your income changes. The same car can be financially reckless for one person and perfectly reasonable for another, and almost insignificant for yet someone else. Which is exactly why comparing yourself to your neighbors is such a dangerous game. You don't know their income. You don't know whether they inherited money. You don't know if they're leasing or financing or own it outright. You don't know if they financed the car over 84 months. You don't know whether they're saving 20% of their income towards their retirement. Or maybe they're carrying credit card debt every month. You only know what you can see, the car. And that's exactly why cars make such an effective status symbols. They reveal almost nothing while encouraging everyone to imagine everything. That's a terrible basis for making financial decisions. So instead of comparing outward appearances, let's compare percentages. Because percentages don't care about badges on the cars, they don't care about leather seats, and they don't care whether the logo says Honda, Lexus, BMW, or Audi, or a Mitsubishi. Percentages tell you how much of your future you're committing to the car. And that's the number that matters the most. Now here's where another misconception shows up. People often ask whether it's smarter to lease or to finance a car. Honestly, for people who replace their cars every 4 or 5 years anyway, the difference isn't nearly as dramatic as the internet sometimes makes it sound. Suppose you finance a car for 5 years. When it's paid off, you own the vehicle and it's worth something, maybe quite a bit. But if you trade it in, that equity helps pay for your next one. Now suppose you lease instead. Your monthly payment is often lower because you're essentially paying for the depreciation during the lease period rather than purchasing the entire car. It's different mechanics, but similar outcome. In one case, you're making larger payments and later you can recover the value. In the other, you're making smaller payments, but you don't build any ownership. Financially, they often arrive in roughly the same neighborhood if your habit is to always get another new car every few years. That's why I don't think the biggest financial decision is lease versus finance. The bigger decision comes afterward. What happens when the payments stop? Because that's exactly where people split into two very different groups. The first group finishes paying off the loan, looks at now 5-year-old car with maybe 60 or 70,000 miles on it, and immediately starts dropping again. The payment disappears only to be replaced with another payment soon after. 5 more years of more payments, then another, then another. The car changes, but the payment never fully goes away. The second group does something different. They keep driving the same car. Not forever, just longer. Maybe 8 years, maybe 10, maybe even 12 if it's still reliable and doesn't need that much repair. And something interesting happens. Their car payments disappear, but instead of letting that money disappear too, they redirect it. Not to a dealership and not to a bank, but to themselves. This is exactly where the Freedom Stack really begins to work. What these people do is they take a liability, the car, and turn it into an asset. Because every month that payment no longer goes to the lender, it begins building options for themselves instead. Now, before someone says, well, that's easy if you don't care about cars, that's actually not what I have personally observed. Some of the most financially successful people I know genuinely appreciate good cars. They simply refuse to let today's excitement rob tomorrow's opportunities from themselves. That's a difference between enjoying a nice car and needing every new car. Those are not the same thing. And the surprising thing is how quickly we adapt anyway. Think back to the last exciting purchase that you have made. Maybe it was a car, maybe it was a new phone, a watch, a gaming computer, a kitchen renovation. For the first week, you noticed it all the time. But after a month, it became normal. And after 6 months, it's just your life. It's background noise. Psychologists have a name for this: hedonic adaptation. We adapt remarkably quickly to improvements in our circumstances. That shiny new car that felt extraordinary on day one becomes your regular car, which means you're often making 5 years of payments for a feeling that lasts barely a few months. That's worth thinking about, not because you shouldn't enjoy nice things, but because you should know exactly what you're buying. You're not purchasing 5 years of excitement. You're purchasing just a few months of novelty, followed by years of normal everyday life. And once you recognize that, you begin asking a different question. How can I enjoy a great car without paying the highest possible price for that experience? That's the spot where one of the smartest buying habits comes into the picture. The answer to that question is surprisingly simple. Buy the car after someone else has already absorbed the most painful part of depreciation. In other words, let someone else buy it new. This is why financially disciplined people often end up buying cars that are only a few years old. Even when they can easily afford a new car, they still understand the economics. The first owner usually takes the biggest hit. A brand new car, when it leaves the dealership lot, immediately becomes just a used car. But a second owner gets something very different. They get most of that new experience without paying the full price premium. A 2 or 3 year old car that just came off a lease can be an incredibly sweet spot. It has already taken the depreciation hit. It may still have the factory warranty remaining, or for nominal cost you can buy an extended warranty either from the dealer or on your own. It has modern safety features, and it will feel new enough to you. And most importantly, the previous owner already paid for the privilege of being the first person to drive it. Think about that. A person leases a luxury SUV for 3 years. They configure it, they choose the premium package, they add an upgraded sound system. They enjoy the smell of a brand new interior. Then, 3 years later, they return it. And you buy it. You get almost the same experience, but at a much lower cost. This isn't about driving an old, unreliable clunker. This is about recognizing that new and valuable are not always the same thing. A car can be newer, but not necessarily a better financial decision. And this is where the smart buyers separate themselves from the masses. They don't ask, what's the nicest car I can technically get approved for? Instead, they ask themselves, what's the nicest car that still allows my money to do other things I want? So let's make this practical. Suppose you take home $4,000 a month after taxes and deductions. A reasonable target for your car payment might be around 10% of your take-home income, roughly $400 a month. Now, maybe that sounds low, especially when you see what other people are driving around. But remember, the goal isn't to buy the maximum amount of car. It's to buy a nice car while continuing to build wealth. At today's interest rates, a $24,000 car financed over 60 months at around 6% current interest rates is roughly in the $460-$480 per month range. It's just a little bit above that target, but it's still in the neighborhood. And more importantly, This is not a beat-up car. This could be a very nice, reliable, lightly used vehicle. A recent model, Toyota Camry, maybe a Honda Accord, or a well-maintained SUV. A vehicle that feels like a significant upgrade to your current ride, but without becoming a financial sinkhole. And if you have extra money in some months, great, you can accelerate the repayment of the loan. But here's the part that really separates financially smart people. The loan ending is not the end of the strategy, it is the beginning. Because the mistake many people make is thinking, my car is paid off, now I can afford a better car. But the smarter person thinks, my car is paid off, now I can afford to buy myself freedom. The payment doesn't disappear, it gets redirected. Let's use that same example again. A $460 monthly payment. Once the loan is gone, that money goes into a high-yield savings account. Not occasionally, but automatically, just like it went to the bank before, month after month. After just 1 year, you've accumulated roughly $5,500. And after 4 years, you've saved more than $22,000. And remember what happens during that time? You were still driving that same car. The same car that was already good enough to bring you from place to place while you were still making payments on it. It's still good enough when you're no longer making payments. This is the part many people underestimate. A paid-off car is not a depreciating asset. It is an asset working for you. Every month you keep driving it is a month where someone else is not receiving your money. And that creates a powerful compounding effect. Because now when your car eventually does need replacing, you're no longer starting from zero. You're no longer walking into a dealership and saying, I need a car, how much can I borrow or get approved for? You're walking in saying, I have $25K saved. What makes the most sense? That completely changes the negotiation. It changes your stress level. It changes your options. And if your income has grown during that time, now you have even more flexibility. Maybe you do decide to upgrade. Maybe you do want the nicer SUV. Maybe you even step up to a luxury car. The difference is that now you're buying a car from the position of strength, not position of desperation. There is a world of difference between buying a $50,000 car because the bank approved you for it, and buying a $50,000 car because you can comfortably afford it. The first person owns the car, but the second person owns the choice. And that principle applies far beyond cars. It's the same reason wealthy people often appear less wealthy than people who are trying to look wealthy. Because wealth and status are not the same thing. Status is about what other people can see, but wealth is about what other people cannot see. It's the investment account, the emergency fund, the lack of debt, the ability to say no, and the ability to walk away. It's the ability to make decisions without being trapped by monthly payment obligations. These things don't photograph well. You can't post them on your socials. They don't get attention at a stoplight, but they change your life. Now, this doesn't mean that everybody should drive the cheapest car possible. Personal finance advice sometimes swings way too far in that direction. It turns into never spend money on anything enjoyable. That's not realistic. Money exists to serve your life, not the other way around. If cars are your passion, if you truly love driving, or you have a long commute and you spend a lot of time in your vehicle, if it's the thing that brings you genuine enjoyment, maybe allocating more money towards your car makes complete sense. Someone else might spend that money on travel, or maybe they spend it on a beautiful home or a better location. Someone else might spend it on their hobbies. There is no universal correct answer. The mistake is not in spending the money. The mistake is spending money without understanding the trade-offs. You can spend it today, you can save it for tomorrow, or you can invest it. You can use it to buy convenience, comfort, experiences, or status. But you can't spend the same dollar twice. And cars are especially dangerous because they combine a large expense with a very powerful emotional reward. Which brings us to the question everyone eventually asks themselves. What if I really want the nicer car? What if I've worked hard? And what if you've actually earned more? What if you don't want to drive the sensible choice forever? My answer to that is not never. It is make sure the car is a reflection of your success and not a substitute for it. Let's make this more concrete. Imagine someone earning $70K a year. They walk into a dealership and fall in love with a $50,000 Audi. And maybe they can technically get approved. Maybe the salesperson says, don't worry, the payment is only around $1,000 a month. That sentence sounds strangely comforting. Only. But only is one of the most expensive words in personal finance. Because $1,000 a month is not really $1,000. It's $12,000 every year. And after taxes, Someone making 70,000 is probably bringing home and spending money somewhere around 50 or 55K, depending on their specific situation. That means the car is consuming more than 20% of their take-home pay. Before gas, before oil changes, and before anything else that they want their money to do. Could someone make it work? Of course. People can make all kinds of things work. They simply cut somewhere else. They delay saving. They carry less emergency cash. They tell themselves they'll catch up later when they get that raise. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. But the question isn't, can I survive this decision? The question should be, does this decision move me closer to the life I want to live? Because that's a much higher standard. Now, maybe someone says, wait, what about enjoying life? What about rewarding yourself? And I agree, that's a fair question. But I think it's important to address because financial discipline can sometimes be misunderstood as permanent sacrifice, and it is not. The goal isn't to spend your entire life waiting for some imaginary future version of yourself who finally gets permission to enjoy things. That's not wealth, that's postponing life. The goal is balance. The goal is to enjoy things you value while also protecting your future simultaneously. The smarter person might absolutely buy the Audi, but maybe they do it after their income actually supports it comfortably. Maybe they buy it after they have investments growing. Maybe they buy it after they have no more high-interest credit card debt. Maybe they buy it after they have saved enough that the payment doesn't change their lifestyle. The same car can be irresponsible at one stage of life and perfectly reasonable at another. Timing matters, which is exactly why income is such a powerful anchor. Your income is not everything, obviously. Someone making 200K a year with a terrible spending habit can be broke. Someone making 60K with excellent habits can build substantial wealth. One simple guideline that many financial disciplined people follow is this. Your car should generally be less than about half of your annual gross income. Not because there's some magical law of money, there isn't, but because it creates a reasonable boundary, a guardrail of sorts. You make 50K, a car under 25 makes sense. If you make 100, maybe a car under 50 becomes reasonable for you. If you make 200K, now maybe that $50,000 car isn't consuming the same percentage of your life as it would be before. And if you've built savings, maybe you can comfortably buy something even nicer. The point isn't the exact number. The point is having a framework before your emotions have a chance to take over. Because if emotions arrive first, you will see the car, you will imagine yourself in it, you'll picture the reactions, you picture the feelings, and the spreadsheet and math comes later if at all. And by then, the decision often feels already made and you're just trying to justify it. This is exactly why smart people create rules and guardrails before they need them. They don't wait until they're standing in a showroom with a salesperson explaining the payment options. They decide ahead of time. They create guardrails. Not because they like discipline, but because they understand their human nature. We're all vulnerable to the same things. We all want to feel successful. We all want recognition. We all want some visible proof that our effort mattered. And cars are incredibly efficient at providing that feeling. The problem is that the feeling is temporary, but the payments are not. And that's the trade-off many people never really consider. The new car smell lasts a few weeks, but the loans last years. The attention from other people lasts several days, but the financial commitment lasts much longer. And eventually, something interesting happens. The people who buy the more expensive car often realize something surprising. Almost nobody cares. Not in the way that they imagined. Your coworkers might notice it for a day, your neighbors might look at it for a week, your friends might mention it when they first arrive or the first time they see you in it, and then the life moves on. Everyone returns to thinking about their own problems, their own goals, their own insecurities. The person who was most impressed by the car is usually the person driving it. That isn't a criticism, it's human. We're all the centers of our own experiences. We feel every upgrade, every improvement, every new purchase, but other people rarely experience it with us all the time. This is exactly where understanding psychology becomes incredibly valuable. Because the smartest financial decisions are often not about the math. It's about knowing yourself, knowing what excitement you have, knowing that excitement fades, and knowing that comparisons never end. The reality is there will always be someone with a nicer car, a bigger house, a newer watch, a more impressive title. If your definition of success depends on having the thing that proves that you are successful, you will always be chasing and you will always feel behind. There's always another level. Because the finish lines just keep moving. And another person is ahead, it's another upgrade. The financial free person eventually realizes something different. The goal isn't to look successful. The goal is to become successful. And those two things look very different. One path spends money to communicate success, but the other path quietly accumulates the things that create success. One buys the appearance of freedom, and the other builds actual freedom. And this is exactly why some of the wealthiest people you meet don't necessarily drive the most impressive vehicles. Not because they can't, but because they don't need the car to prove anything to anyone. They already know. Their confidence doesn't come from the badge on the hood of their car. It comes from knowing that their money is working for them while they sleep. It comes from knowing that they have choices. And that brings us back to the main question. How do smart people buy cars? They don't ask, how much can I borrow? Instead, they wonder, how much of my future do I want this car to consume? They understand the difference between a purchase and a commitment, and they understand that every financial decision is also in some way a lifestyle decision. They understand that the best purchase is not always the one that creates the biggest impression on others. Sometimes it's the one that creates more freedom. But there is one final piece of this strategy that ties everything together, because the real advantage isn't just buying the right car. It's what happens after you buy it. Because the truth is, the car itself is only the beginning. The real difference between financially thoughtful people and everyone else is what they do once the purchase is already made. They don't just buy differently, they build differently. They understand that financial progress often comes from taking one decision and stacking the benefits over time. Many people think that the car decision happens on the day that they sign the paperwork. It doesn't. The decision continues every month afterward. Every month you make a payment, you're reinforcing the one path. Every month you avoid an unnecessary payment, you reinforce the other opportunity. And this is exactly why this simple strategy can become so powerful. Buy a reliable, recent year used car. Buy it within your means, pay it off, and keep driving it. And redirect your old payment towards savings. Repeat. It sounds almost too simple. But simple strategies are often the ones people underestimate because they don't create an immediate emotional reward. There is no dramatic moment. No one is congratulating you for keeping your paid-off car another year or two. Nobody sees your automatic investment transfers on Instagram. Nobody applauds your emergency fund growing in the background. Nobody notices the debt that you have avoided. But these invisible decisions are exactly what creates visible outcomes later. Financial success is often boring in the beginning. This is why so many people miss it. The person buying the expensive car gets the immediate reward, but the person investing the difference gets the delayed reward. And it's the delayed rewards that are difficult because they require you to believe in a future you cannot yet see. But eventually, the math catches up. The person who constantly upgrades cars has a lifetime of payments, and the person who lets their car payments expire begins redirecting that same money towards themselves. And over the years, that difference compounds, not just financially, but psychologically as well. Because something changes when you stop needing every single paycheck to maintain your current lifestyle. You gain confidence and breathing room. You gain the ability to make decisions based on what you want, not just what you can afford today. That is a huge benefit, the freedom to choose. Because the money's greatest purpose isn't really in buying things outright. It's buying options. Options to leave a bad job. Options to start a business you fancy. Options to take time off when your family needs you, or go on a nicer vacation so you can enjoy your restful time. The option to handle an unexpected problem or expense without panic. And the option to make decisions because they're right for you and not because you're trapped in those decisions and that's the only thing you can afford. That is the hidden cost of an oversized car payment. It's not just the money leaving your account, it's the options that you never create for yourself. Now, none of this means everyone should drive a 10-year-old economy car forever. That's not the lesson in this. The lesson is make sure your car is serving your lifestyle instead of controlling and restricting it. If a car brings you genuine happiness and fits comfortably within your financial plan, by all means enjoy it. Life is not a spreadsheet, and money is a tool. The purpose of being financially responsible is not to avoid every pleasure. It is to make sure your pleasures don't become problems. The smarter people simply decide what trade-offs they're willing to accept. And maybe the most interesting thing is that after a while, many of them discover something unexpected. The thing they thought would make them feel successful wasn't actually what made them feel successful. It wasn't the car, it was the freedom. The freedom created by knowing that they weren't trapped. The confidence created by knowing they're making choices intentionally. The peace of mind created by knowing that they were building something worthwhile. Because at the end of the day, there are two ways to buy a car. You can buy the car that tells everyone else that you've made it, or you can buy the car that helps you actually make it. Sometimes those are the same car, but many times they aren't. The first one creates an impression, and the second one creates a foundation. And the funny thing is, the foundation is usually what eventually allows you to buy anything you want. The people who become wealthy rarely get there because they found a secret investment or because they discovered some hidden shortcut. More often, they simply avoided repeatedly making decisions that limit their futures. They protected their options and they created margins. They allowed small advantages add up over time. A smart car purchase is simply just one of those advantages. Not because a car is the most important thing in your financial life. It's because cars are one of the easiest places to accidentally sabotage it. A vehicle is a wonderful servant, but it is a terrible master. So before you buy your next car, don't just ask yourself, can I make the payments? Instead ask, what does this payment prevent me from becoming? Because the best car isn't always the one that makes people look at you when you drive by. Sometimes it's the one that lets you build the life you actually want. And years later, when you look back, the thing you'll appreciate most probably wouldn't be the badge sitting in your driveway. It will be the choices you still had because you didn't trade them away earlier on. Because status is something other people notice, but freedom is something you only get to live. Thank you.